Hello, this is Randy Allen from Engraving Concepts. Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Randy Allen, presenting from the Engraving Concepts showroom in Arlington, Texas. And for some of you that don't know Arlington or Texas, Arlington is right in between Dallas and Fort Worth. And we have two locations to serve our customers. We have one in, there you see the map, Dallas, Fort Worth, and then my colleague, let me mention my colleague down in Houston. Jimmy, how are you doing today? How long you been in this industry?
I've been in this industry since 1989. I was a production manager for an industrial engraving shop in the Houston area. And then I went to work for a manufacturer in Louisiana for about 18 years. And for the last 5 years, I've been selling Epilog lasers.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Jimmy. And we want to let everyone know that this presentation will be recorded for future viewings. And we want to hear from you. So we'd love to hear from everyone. Please ask questions in our chat, that chat that's in the presentation window. And we'll do our best to answer the questions during or after the presentation. But by chance, if we don't get to yours now, then we can always handle that via email afterwards. And for those of you that are just joining in, we want to welcome you and thank you for your time. Now let's get started. If you were to visit our showrooms in either Houston or Arlington, you would see and feel and pick samples off the wall and hold in your hands and touch samples that are done out of many different materials. And what Jimmy has on the screen is the sample club of the Epilog Laser website. So that is at epiloglaser.com. Under the resources, upper right, down to the sample club. And so what you see here is this is a great idea page. This idea page is not a club you have to sign into. It's free. You can visit this page and you can see many different projects that are created. So they provide in each different project how to provide a sample of the project being made. They give you the view of what it's going to look like. Then if you scroll down further into the sample, you'll see the graphics are available for download. And then they tell you where to buy the plastic material for this particular sample. And so they give you the steps on where to buy each project. Furthermore, following down, you see the speed and power settings and the machine they used for each. And then they instruct you on how to prepare the design art files and then how to send that over to the machine, over to the material. So if we back out of this particular sample in our sample club, you're going to see just many samples from wood and plastic, crystal, granite, marble, and tile, canvas. And of course, being able to laser so many different materials, you actually get to see these materials go into so many different industries. And so we have not only the sample club, but we're demonstrating also the video gallery. So there is a large gallery that demonstrates the project in action and showing the machine how to build these projects and showing how to put that in the machine and run the unit. So not only do we have the video gallery, but we also have a photo gallery. So these resources have been professionally done. They're for your viewing purposes to look and see what products, what materials are available to use in the laser, what's compatible with the laser. We'll talk later about maybe what materials aren't all that compatible inside a laser machine. And although our beloved awards and recognition industry is still a leading market for laser systems, these lasers working day and night into many different industries, such as industrial, for oil and gas tags. You can get into fabric cutting for quilters, steel tumblers, and hundreds of different promotional products, woodworking industries, craft shows, horse shows, rodeos, weddings, big market there, weddings and gifts, and so much more. And so again, the stress is all of this is done with basically one machine. One machine is able to create all of these types of images and products. So we want to thank you for attending today. And our agenda is going to look something like this. Jimmy and I are going to go through some sample materials. as if you were in our showroom, show you how we put the material in the machine. Then we're going to maybe back pan to some of the design software layout and show you the driver settings on how we manipulate those. And then we'll wrap up things touching on some highlights of some features of the system itself. So this particular video is for the Fusion Pro. And so the Fusion Pro is our latest and greatest unit. It is a system that comes in two sizes, 32 inches or 48 inches. So without further ado, thank you everyone for attending, and here we go. So we are going to right into the machine. So here we have the Fusion Pro 32. Now this is a 32-inch by 20-inch area of engraving and cutting edge to edge. And it has a front door that opens up here. And it also has a top glass door. And so it has a touch screen that I have some jobs already saved. So one of the key features of this particular new unit is you can actually save jobs to the machine. So every job listed on that touchscreen that has the disk icon is savable on the unit. You can also easily delete the job from the unit. So once the job is sent from the design software from the computer over to the touchscreen, then you can save that to the machine. So we're going to put in some anodized aluminum, very thin business card size aluminum, and we're going to run a job that's in queue already. I'm going to slide that to the corner, and it's a very thin black coated material. And when we execute this job, that's going to move out over the material and use a feature called autofocus. Autofocus is raising the material up and touching a plunger to gauge the correct distance away for the lens that's installed. And so it's going to move back and forth, printing this image, basically printing, etching, and if you're new to lasers, you might hear a lot of different terms on YouTube about what laser is and what it does. Let me just say for vocabulary's sake that we kind of look at the terms here as laser etching or laser marking. Some call it printing, laser printing. Some call it engraving. Basically, it's using a laser, a CO2 gas laser, to pulse as if it were an inkjet printer. And it's firing dots of laser energy, light, down to this material. And what you're seeing, that flash of light, is the combustible material turning from a solid to a gas. And the gases are vented back out of the back of the unit. But this material is very conducive to showing grayscales. This is anodized aluminum. So what we're seeing there are shades of coloring and halftones, if you will, from the artwork, show it very visibly on the material. And so whether you're printing, etching, the technical term for all of those terms is really called raster engraving. Much of the laser industry uses the term raster engraving to tell the laser, I would like to print or mark the image from the design software to the material. So straight out of the gate, if you were to come to our showroom in Houston or Arlington, Dallas, Fort Worth, we would take a piece of aluminum, slide it to the corner, and get right to work showing you the benefits of being able to mark with high resolution artwork and graphics right onto this material. When this finishes, we're going to pull it out and show you a couple of things. We're going to really get you a close-up view of the product, the sample, but also show you how long it took to burn that particular piece. So while we're waiting for that to finish, we'll pull this job out. And it's also fair to say that all of these machines are safety. You can run these machines. They're very safety conscious in that you can run them you can run them in homes and not be scared, because everything has to be interlocked and it's safety for the doors.
Andy, if you don't mind, let me make a quick comment on that.
Jump in, Jimmy.
So all of Epilog systems are Class 2 laser products, meaning that if you raise the lid or open the front door, the beam shuts off. Please be aware there are systems out there that look like they're enclosed, but they're actually Class 4 lasers. And Class 4 lasers don't have the safety mechanisms that the Epilog system does.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for that, Jimmy. We also see that only took a little over 2 minutes or so to print that full business card image. And so now we're going to laser the same material, just flipping the business card sample over. We're going to laser a photograph. And this is a great example of laser etching a photo at a very low resolution. And I'm kind of getting in a little bit of training when we talk about photographs and resolution here. Don't mean to get into the meat of it for a demonstration, but what we have is a photograph where the background has been knocked out, so it's been processed, and it's also shown as a negative on the software. We won't show that really right now, but in our design software, we would show a negative. And we're printing this image. I want to show that at 200 DPI. So not all images that you see in photography have to be printed with a high resolution. In fact, many times it's best to laser photographs at a lower resolution. If you think about what a laser is really doing on photos, it's not putting, if you put too many dots or burn off too much dots, then it pulls off too much material. Now on an ink printer, you really want that, but for a laser, you need to leave as much of the background material there as possible, but enough to show detail. Jimmy, anything to add on that for photos?
I'd say that if you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to invert the image, it depends on what color is actually being marked on the material. So like if you're marking on acrylic, you get a white mark. If you mark on glass, you get a white mark. And you mark on black marble, you get a white mark. So on all those three materials, you're going to have to invert the image. But if I was marking on wood, you would not do that because your mark is actually darker than the background material.
Absolutely. So as we pull that out of here, you can see it's very cold to the touch. There's no heat applied really to the material that sticks. And so just a beautiful, get real close up of that photo. Just a good resolution. And that's a 200 DPI. So it doesn't take much time to burn photos. So now we're going to move into our next project. And there you see, actually, before I move on, the minute and 30 seconds. So this machine has a built-in job time estimator, which we'll talk about in a minute. But on the screen of the laser, on the touch screen, you actually see how long it's going to take to burn a material or run a job. And this is great for coding jobs, isn't it, Jimmy?
It is. So you can actually see real time in our dashboard driver when you change resolution, how long is it going to take to engrave? So if you had a customer that gave you a job, you could, lay out the job real quick, send it to the dashboard driver, and you can see exactly how long it's going to take to engrave.
Mm-hmm. So here we're going to put in our cutting grid. And so the reason is we're going to put this in because we want to do our next sample. And what we're going to do is take a piece of material and not only engrave it, but also we're going to cut it. And so this helps the laser beam as it passes through the acrylic not to keep all of that residue and flames underneath the material. So it lets it escape down through the grid. So this is now really going to get into the heart of what we want to show about the Fusion Pro. Notice I'm not putting this sample in the upper left-hand corner. I'm just tossing that out in the middle of the table. Now I'm going to illustrate here how this is going to be used from the computer design software to the laser. So when you have your image on the screen in whatever software, it can be Illustrator, Inkscape, CorelDRAW, doesn't matter. When we print this job, we literally say File and Print. And we don't even do much execution of settings here. We just say print, which is going to go right to the machine. So there is a built-in live camera system. And that when we click on print, that's going to go right to the driver dashboard of the Fusion Pro. So here, unlike any other unit, you have a system that's giving you live video feed of your material that's in here. And so no longer do I have to put something in the corner. I certainly could if it was rectangular and easier. But now we have the ability to take that image and position that anywhere on the table we want to engrave. Now this is extremely helpful. If you're not aware, this will cut down a lot of setup time on odd shaped pieces that you have in many different industries. And so we can take our graphic and literally drag and drop it where we want it to be placed and engraved on our part. I'm not even grabbing a ruler or a measuring stick. We can, no calipers. We're actually just positioning that visually where we want to. We can resize the image. We can rotate the image. We can copy and paste. We can ungroup and delete. So there's a few things we can do here. And then so once we have that set the way we want, we're going to spend a little time kind of showing a bit of the dashboard settings. And over off to the right, those that have run lasers before will notice you have to kind of set some settings for the laser and how it's going to operate. Jimmy, you want to talk about the dashboard a minute on raster and vector?
Sure. So on the raster side, it's going to split away. We have default set, so it splits the raster and the vector into two different processes. You can see here that Randy's adjusting the resolution, the speed, and the power. He can go through and he can change the dithering options. So we've got even if it's, say, for example, a yellow color, we can make it not dither in this new dashboard. You can also set the number of cycles. That's how many passes it's going to make per color, if you will, or per process. Right now, he's got it split by hairlines, but if you sent over a job that had 3 or 4 colors, it automatically split by color. When he clicks here on the material settings, this is where you can save. Of course, the system's going to come with a lot of default settings, but you can create your own material settings. And he loads that material setting for acrylic, and then we'll do the same, I'm sure, for the vector. So the vector process, which is below this, you also can do the same thing. You can load that information.
Yeah,
You
really showing how the DPI affects the time there. You see that minute 31.
Right.
And then there's the vector. Go ahead, Jimmy.
So you're going into the vector here. You've got your speed, your power, your frequency, and of course, you can adjust those as needed. In this case, we're going to have the frequency maxed out. He's going to load a default setting over here for the acrylic for 1/8 inch acrylic, and then it's going to come through and it's going to load the settings that we need for that.
Talk about frequency. What's the frequency do, Jimmy?
So frequency is like the pulsing per linear inch whenever it's cutting something out. If I'm cutting acrylic, I want to maximize that so it melts the edge. When I go to cut wood or paper, I want to drop that down to maybe 10% or lower. And that gives me a lighter colored edge. But with acrylic, we want to melt the edge.
Yep.
You can see the different settings that he have in there, and it's going to apply it, of course, when we go to print.
Yeah, so laying that out there, again, we just can't emphasize enough the simplicity of being able to take something from design software, not really messing with it much in the printer property stage, but printing that straight to the machine. And everything opens up really nice in one screen here. So when we use the dashboard, we can go in and tell it we're going to manually adjust our settings if we're really just trying to test a material. We really want to spend some time here getting familiar with the other settings, such as the sorting. Sorting is where you can change the inside out or optimize. And what this does is we have this keychain that we're going to cut. So obviously we won't, kind of like a router, if you send that over to engrave and cut, we would want the little piece to cut first and then the big piece cut last. So in that vector sorting, we have the ability to choose optimized or inside out. And that's really helpful when you're cutting a lot of big pieces that might fall through, and optimize that strategic cutting path. So now when we send the job to the machine, we simply touch the screen on the display and then push go. And when we push go, it's going to move that over and autofocus. So autofocus was a feature that's selected, and that means it's going to go autofocus using a plunger to touch the material, just like it did on that piece of metal. And as an operator, I really appreciate the fact that it's going to adjust the material for me. We're going from a thin piece of metal to a piece of acrylic that's different height. Well, I didn't have to use a manual focus gauge or anything like that to do that. The machine did that for me. How's that coming through, Jimmy?
It looks good. You can see the nice contrast on the cast acrylic that we're using. You have two types of acrylic. You have cast and there is extruded. The cast acrylic gives us this nice white contrast, where extruded, if you go to laser, it gives you kind of a melted look. As far as vector cutting, they both cut about the same. But if I was going to do, say, for example, an edge-lit sign or an award, I want cast acrylic.
Yeah, so as Jimmy mentioned, this is cast acrylic. Try and get a little different, closer view, but as you're burning this, I have the image mirrored in the software. So when it printed it, we're typically laser engraving on the back of most of your award products, promotional products. We want to laser the back side, and then we're going to show through the front. And I do kind of want to show some settings here at 400 DPI and this is the time. Sorry for the screen there, a little bright on the screen, but you know, when you talk about a keychain, you know, engraved and cut in a full size like that, doesn't take long at all. So now it moved from the engraving to the cutting, or the raster to the vector. So you can see at that speed, it's cutting this out very cleanly, very quick, and that's just going to drop right out. And maybe we'll talk about wattage a little bit later, but this is a 60 watt and cutting, slicing through about 1/8 inch material. And so I'll pull this out of here and get a different camera angle on it so you can see that a little better. But as we zoom up on this, you're going to see a really bright white contrasting part that's been laser etched and mirrored. So when we flip that around, we're going to peel off the protective side on the front and then knock out our keychain piece there, and then we'll see a nice frosted white. But that's really easy to do. Now I could have done the mirroring in the machine's dashboard, so to speak, but it's easier to do either way in the design software or the machine. But here, Jimmy, is that coming through? We got a nice clean cut and engraving. What do you think?
Yeah, it's got a nice fire polished edge and really good contrast on the engraving. Looks great.
So also what I want to demonstrate is, since we have this material and job saved, some might be asking, well, you save this to the machine, is that going to be back in the same place that you ran it the first time? And the answer is yes. So when we save a job, it saves literally every setting. And therefore, if we run that job, it's going to be in the same place. Well, you might say, well, how am I going to get that back in the same place? Well, we have a feature on our touchscreen called our trace button. And our trace button lets us use, in conjunction with our red dot pointer, we can actually push that button. That's going to go out and act like it's going to engrave it, but it does a test pass, just kind of showing us a perimeter pass on where that's going to be engraved. So what I did in this example is I'm going to take a piece of another material and use the red dot pointer, and with that's turned on, I can slide my material underneath that as that's moving, and I can adjust my material and get that just right so that it is going to be encompassing the red dot. I'll get that adjusted so that I'm looking at all of the material being used and make sure that fits. And once I'm sure that's going to all fit in the engraving space, then I can clear that out. And then, of course, we could rerun that same next job. What do you think about that? Pretty handy, huh, Jimmy?
Oh, very handy. And you know, this is a very useful tool if you already had a bigger piece and you're trying to figure out, is the engraving in the right location where it needs to be. It's something, maybe a wood project or something of that nature.
Yeah, we've seen all kinds of odd shaped pieces, such as guitars. And you know, something else you can do with this camera that I don't really touch on this video, but there is another video for, is the ability to take a snapshot picture. So from the dashboard, you could actually literally take a picture with that camera and bring that design picture back into your design software. And then you can bring that and use that design software to create an outline fixture to hold something. Anything to add to that?
It's that's really useful if you had something printed on some acrylic or on some wood, like UV printed, and you want to just be able to cut it out, and you don't have the vector. So you could actually bring it into CorelDRAW and do a trace of the image, and at that point you could cut it out.
So just taking a piece of wood, this is not the same thickness, which is why I really love the autofocus. We're just going to run that out and run this next job to the middle of the table. And I've got that design. This is going to be our cowboy design. It's a piece of clip art with some cut out pieces around it and some shapes. And so we're going to show the design. And again, you don't have to use, I'm using CorelDRAW, but you could use Corel, you could use Inkscape, Illustrator. This literally could be just about any design from any program that you can print. That's the beauty of the Epilog laser. One of the real key features is its ease of use. You're not locked down to certain software you have to use. Once you design it in whatever software you want, you can basically then just print that to the unit. And here we have an outline that is around encompassing the piece of clip art. And this is going to be, again, what we call a combination job. It's going to raster engrave the image first and then vector cut last. So I'm going to move and expose my printable area. And the reason that those purple lines are there to show what size I made the page in my design software. But I can easily move those away. And if I'd also made that page in my design software 32 by 20, then I wouldn't have those lines to contend with. They would just be the full size of the table. So you're really able to zoom up real close. I could even get closer than this, where we kind of tilt that image just right. I mean, and not even having to grab a ruler or a caliper to get this set. I just think it's so beneficial to many different products and operations. And as Jimmy said, we've got our dashboard driver over here on the right side of the screen, where we can tell it what speed and power we want to use to engrave, and then what speed and power. And that was automatic. I mean, when it sensed that we have a part that's going to be engraved and then a part that's going to be cut, you see that separated that automatically over there in the dashboard. So we have the ability to load a predetermined setting for the raster engraving, 600 DPI, 100 speeds, and then we'll collapse that and go to the vector setting. So we're importing that from the list of the vector tab. And notice we provide a ton of sample materials, or Epilog does, with the dashboard. So this is done when you install it. You get a library for free with the unit that shows all of these different materials. But as Jimmy said, you can add to that list. And so there's some settings we'll make for cutting to this particular project. Not only speed and power, but frequency is really important. And so we're going to choose the plunger. You see at the top there, that plunger is going to be initialized to be used when it executes the job over the material. It's going to raise the table material up into the plunger, and then it's going to drop that down the right distance away from the lens. So when we print that, we see how long it's going to take to print it, not only in the dashboard, but also over here on the touch screen. So we can select our job and then push the go button. So that's automatically touching the surface of the material and ready to engrave. Jimmy, you want to talk about engraving or cutting different kinds of woods?
Sure. When this is alder that we're using right here, but typically what you want is a nice hardwood that's light in color that gives you the best contrast. That doesn't mean we can't mark on other woods. We can mark on all kinds of dark woods, mesquite, or if I was marking on walnut. If I wanted to get a nice contrast image, I might use alder, I might use maple, ash, cherry wood, or birch. Those are some of the more popular woods that you might go to engrave. You just want to make sure that you don't use any pressure treated woods, because that can emit fumes that you don't want to breathe in. Also, we find that as far as plywoods go, you want to use furniture grade plywoods. If you try to engrave like an outdoor grade plywood, the glues in that don't allow you to really cut through that material too easily.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of different plywoods out there, and there's so much video and pictures on YouTube about what wood is the best, and you can take two pieces of plywood from the hobby store or hardware store, and they may look exactly the same but may cut totally different. So you really have to do your homework and really test the material that you want to burn and use for certain projects. You definitely want to test the laser and how that material responds to the laser, how deep it engraves, how much power it takes to engrave through maybe a first layer. But Jimmy is right in that if you have now this is a solid wood that we're engraving here, but different plywoods have a lot of adhesives, a lot of glues, a lot of fillers that block the penetration of the laser beam through the material. And it can get pretty frustrating for a lot of operators that use the wrong material, because the plywood may cut one part of the laser really clean, but then the next piece it just may leave off and not go all the way through at all, not even close. So you really want to take the time and do your homework testing the speed and the power. And that's why we really want to push for these demonstrations. You really want to test your material in the machine that you're looking at. And again, in our showrooms over in Houston and also Arlington, we recommend that you bring your file. We recommend that you bring your plywood or your woods and materials to us, and let us test and see what speed and power it takes to get through it. And that way you have an accurate time on how long it's going to take to cut it. And we're showing here how it's slicing all the way through that wood. This is a single pass, just cutting all the way through. And one of the things I want to point out when we pull this particular job out of the machine is the spur down by his boot. We really want to illustrate with these high quality performance servo motors, you can get very accurate positioning and the cutting. So slicing all the way through. Jimmy, oftentimes we get the question, how thick can you cut with a laser? How do you answer that?
I usually answer production speeds. For example, if I was cutting with a 60 watt, I could cut 1/4 inch thick material, an 80 watt, and I say material, let's say acrylic. You can cut through with an 80 watt 3/8 and with 120 watt 1/2 inch. Doesn't mean you can't cut thicker with those wattages. You can, but it's not going to be production speeds. So that's how we like to answer that question. You know, you get a machine, find out what thicknesses you need to cut, and then we can tell you the best wattage for that particular thickness.
Well, I hope that spur is coming out really clean. I mean, I'm trying to get a good view, a sample of that, and it's taking me a minute to get my camera focused here. But as I really zoom up and try and get a good focal view of that, that spur has all the points on it. It'll take me just a second here, but that that camera angle is going to show all the points on that spur. Hold on, Jimmy, I'll get it. Let me zoom out a little bit here. But you know, depending on the speed and the power you use, there we go. There's my angle I was looking for. So all of the points are right on that spur, beautifully cut, deep engraved. The text is legible. I mean, I think that's the word concepts is smaller than 5 points. And so here we have the frequency Jimmy mentioned was used so that it cut through the material well, but didn't scorch or burn it. When you're using woods and papers, you want a lower frequency. When you're using acrylic, then you want a higher frequency. All right, so now we're going to move into our next project. We obviously have a pin inside a fixture jig here. Jimmy, we didn't make that jig with the laser, did we?
No, that was made with a router. But if you needed to do, say, a group of pins, you could easily make your own fixture out of MDF or out of acrylic.
So
As you can,
yeah, go
oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Randy.
I was just going to say that the job that you see on the screen has all of the red lines that indicate where you can position that. So you can use your laser to mark. We actually marked those pieces right on the fixture. Once I get this zoomed up and show you where we're going to position the artwork, move these other pieces out of the way. I'll move the lines, exposing the engravable area. And so we're going to take that word, Epilog laser, that piece there. Now what I should also do is tell people that you can turn off the video if you need to kind of show where the artwork is located. Or I could have used a different color for my artwork. I could have used a color green and it might show up against that background a little bit easier. But once I found that, I can drag and manipulate that either by hand, or you see on the left side of the screen over there, the X and the Y. Those values can be used for positioning. So we can use the X and the Y to get that exactly where we want it to go. So the X axis is in the left and right. So you see at the very top, that's like 16 inches. And then the vertical, you know, from 1 and 0 down further, you know, 20 inches down. So we can type in our dashboard exactly where we want that object positioned by changing the X and Y values, or we can simply move the object over with the camera where we want it to be engraved. So if I change that to 16 and push enter, it's going to go right over to 16. So you can be as accurate as you need to, but you know, I will say that the camera is obviously best. It is a physical camera, and so if you get outside the edges, you want to keep most of your most accurate parts right there in the middle. But you kind of see the marks that we made on the fixture itself. That X marks the spot, so to speak. And then now we're kind of positioning that in the middle between the ring and then where the middle of the clip is. So we can kind of expand that out. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about this laser or the camera system, is you can get as close as you need to get as accurate as you need to move that and have that engraving where you want it on the part. So I'm going to import the list from anodized aluminum. It doesn't take much power to burn these powder coated or let's say, you know, anodized thin coated metal painted pins. And so we're going to use our plunger. So what we can do is when we can have a job, even though it might be slightly curved, we can also tell it to use the plunger, so it's going to touch that plunger right at this part. It's going to begin the engraving. And again, this is super helpful if you've got something really odd shaped. As long as you know where your text is going to be positioned and where it's going to be on the part, making sure that's a good solid surface, then we'll be ready to print that and it'll be ready to autofocus. So I sent that job over to the machine. That was all in the dashboard. I'll get a little different accurate viewing position here. And so when we get over to the display, we're able to see that the job made it over there, called pin jig. And that gives us our speed, our power, our DPI. So all we have to do is really select our job and then push the go button. So that's going to move out. And so you see that it's auto focusing on something that's even slightly round. But we have enough. Or you want to cover depth of field, Jimmy?
Sure. So what the depth of field is basically what's the effective vertical cutting distance that a lens can handle. And so with the 2-inch lens, it's got, maybe plus or minus maybe 80, 90 thousandths. So it'll follow a curvature a little bit. If you go with a 4-inch lens, it's going to give you a lot more depth of field. If I wanted to say, for example, laser mark on a basketball, I could use a 4-inch lens.
Yeah, and you're going to cover that later on in the feature set of the optics. I think we're going to get into that toward the end of the presentation. But I wanted to burn the piece of clip art that we did of the boat into a piece of plastic. And the reason I do this, because I think it shows a good representation of different pieces of artwork on different material, or the same artwork in different materials. And so you can have some materials that show grayscales and halftones really easy. But as Jimmy was talking about the wood, you may want to really test your artwork on some different kind of woods that show up better. Now, Jimmy, you've been in the business a long time, worked with a lot of plastics. You want to talk about plastics a minute?
Sure. So this is a laserable 2-ply plastic. That means that, of course, it has a very thin cap and a core color underneath. So as you burn away that cap color, you'll get whatever the core color is underneath. There is a variety of colors of this material readily available. There's also reverse engraved materials where basically you've got like a clear acrylic front with a colored back, and you laser the mirror image on the backside and paint fill whatever color you need. If you ever get some of this 2-ply material and you go to laser and it looks like the two colors melt together, there are some materials out there that are for rotary engraving only that do not laser cleanly. But there's plenty of laserable material out there. Just make sure that that's what you're using, and you should get very good results.
Yeah, this is a very thin cap layer on top. So it doesn't take much laser energy to burn this. And maybe while this is still engraving, we kind of talk about techniques of lasering plastic, because, there's a lot of laser operators we see out there that just simply use too much power. You ever see that, Jimmy?
Yes, all you really are trying to do is just get through that top layer. If you try to go too deep, then the characters aren't going to look as clean. You'll basically have the stroke of the letters will be wider than you really want it. It happens with rotary engraving as well, where people go too deep with their cutter. So you want to just have the right material setting, that power setting that gets just through that cap.
Yeah, so you can see that the Fusion Pro is doing a great job of, beautiful quality, fast speed, autofocus, just real simple ease of use. You're opening up the job in the design software, you're clicking print, you're setting the speed and power, or bringing in a material from the lists already there, and you're sending that to the machine. I mean, how nice is it? You have an autofocus plunger that's very reliable, and that all you do is just push the go button with your material in place, and it's going to go find the surface for you and engrave that piece. I think the ease of use is just second to none. The benefits and the time saving of the autofocus, not have to mess with any other external software to get this job done, I think cuts down a lot of time. So pulling this out, I want to zoom up real close, maybe even too close, but I want to show just the really beautiful job. How's that coming through on your end, Jimmy? Look okay?
Yeah, that's a great shot there. It looks good. It shows the nice dithering that the Epilog lasers can do.
Yeah, so this is the halftone from the clip art, this was just pretty much automatic. It didn't take much to get there. So this is what we're going to engrave next, folks. Moving into our new project, we're going to take some liquid paste from a spray can, and there's different brands of this stuff, but this is a paste that's put on a stainless steel tumbler. Jimmy, why am I putting that on that tumbler?
If you try to mark bare metal with a CO2 laser and the wattages that we sell, it's just going to reflect off. Nothing's going to happen. And so what happens is you're spraying this coating on here, the laser is going to clad that, or basically bond it to that bare metal. And by bonding it to that, it's like a ceramic bonded mark, and it's very durable. It's UV stable. To get it off, you have to sand it off. It allows us to mark on stainless steel, onto brass, onto aluminum, and many other metals.
Thanks for pointing that out, but I also want to, while I have the grid out here, I want to show the folks that this is kind of the table design of the unit. So you have the initial magnetic table that can be used to hold leather or fabric out flat. If you're cutting masks or quilt patterns, you can use the steel table that we first used to stretch it out with magnets. But now with both of the frame and the cutting grid pulled away, we have these crumb tray drawers that make cleaning and servicing the machine just real easy to do. So those crumb trays really make it easy to, you can pull those all the way forward through the front of the machine. You can pull them all the way out if you want, or you can take a shop vac and clean those out. So this is the magnetic table, and like I say, you can use it to stretch out fabric or plastic that may be warped to hold that down if you need to engrave. Jimmy, it's pretty crucial to be able to lay that stuff down and keep things flat, isn't it?
Yes, and so this downdraft table design, it works a lot like a vacuum, but it's using your exhaust fan. So if I had just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper I wanted to cut, I would still have to cover up all those other holes in order to get some downdraft for the material to hold it flat. So think of it just like a vacuum table, if you will. To get good suction, you've got to have all those areas closed.
Man, that's a great point. Yeah, and exhaust is key. A lot of folks don't really take into account. So when you come out to our showroom, we really do a good job of making sure you've got all the necessary components you need to make a successful laser setup. And so this is our rotary attachment. We sprayed that steel tumbler with that liquid paste, and that's going to let us basically cure a material to the surface of that stainless steel tumbler. And so we're demonstrating how, from scratch, if you were at our showroom, we want to kind of give you a step-by-step on what it takes to get this done. And so you saw me lower the table down. So with the table lowered, that gave us clearance for the attachment. And now I have a tag right here. I'm going to show the folks. This says, warning, sorry, my thumb's in the way. Electrical damage may occur. The machine must be powered off prior to insertion or removal of this connector. So getting in a little bit of training here, but this is super important that we have the machine powered off before we plug in this connector. Now, when we plug in this connector, we'll show you here in just a second. We're going to power off first. This is the key to turn off the Fusion Pro. Notice the light switch up there. You can actually use the light switch to turn off the lights on the inside if need be. There's the e-stop button. And so once the machine is fully powered off, we're going to take our connector there with the rotary and plug that in. It just goes right in. There's a clip up to the top, so it can really only go in one way. And once you make sure that's firmly seated, now we're ready to power up the unit. So when we power up the unit, it's going to automatically move out to a new home position. This is going to initialize to the back, and you can kind of see it booting up there on the screen. So not leaving anything out. If you're right there in our showroom, this is what we would do, is we would lower the table, power off the unit, put in the table for the rotary fixture, plug it in, turn it on, and let it boot up. And what you're going to see is the boot up sequence here. And once that's complete, you're going to find that the carriage is out over the center of the attachment. Now, Jimmy, this is an open wheeled attachment, a little bit different than something you might have used in the past. You want to talk about that a minute and the benefits of that open wheel design?
Sure. So our attachment is what's called a rim style. And what that means is that as it turns the mug, it's basically a linear movement. I don't have to have a circumference in order to lay something out unless I want to mark all the way around the item. Also makes it easier for you to put odd shaped pieces in. I could easily put a bowl in here. I could put different size tumblers. I could do a champagne bottle. I could do all kinds of different types of glasses with different footings and stuff. So the idea is that this is extremely versatile when compared to a lathe style rotary attachment, which we sell a 3-jaw chuck version as well for basically grasping and holding small parts. But this is the more versatile version of our rotary attachment and allows you to do all different shaped items.
Did you know that Mr. Brewer one time made a fixture to hold a coconut? We actually had folks that were laser engraving coconuts. And can you
Yeah,
imagine trying to engrave something like an odd shaped coconut and something like a cone style mandrel? It's extremely difficult. But with this open wheeled attachment, it makes it so much easier. Jimmy, talk about leveling. That's important, isn't it?
yes. So we mentioned depth of field a little bit earlier. Having the ability with our attachment here where you can actually, this tapered item, we can level it so that the marking area is perpendicular to the beam, giving us a nice consistent engraving across a tapered object.
Yeah, I know I've seen some other attachments out there that you have to put stuff underneath, and it's just hard to kind of get that level. But Epilog's easy to use. Again, that E there, just ease of use. Um, that attachment with that scissor jack on that right side lets us raise that end up and get that bubble level just right. And then now what we're going to do is I'm going to show the what's called, well, here I'm going to turn on the red dot pointer, but I want to show how we can use the red dot pointer to pinpoint exactly where I want the object to be engraved. And so I'm going to use the jog button, and that allows me to jog the axis, and basically the x-axis, because the y is locked into position. So as we jog the x-axis over, we're going to touch that center point icon in just a moment. And so at the mug or any object that I want to print in the center of, because it's so much easier a lot of times if you have something odd shaped, just to use the center option. I find that much more effective and easier to set up. So there you see the red dot pointer traveling and jogging across the tumbler. And so what I could actually do is find the left side, get a measurement, find the middle or the bottom of where I want that engraving area to be, get a measurement. And basically I can just say, hey, there's the center of that piece. And then by touching the center point icon, that sets the center location. It's extremely effective. It's almost like running a drill press. You just kind of put it where you want it and touch the center, and that's going to show you exactly where you want that to be. There we go. So once I have that set up where the mug is in, I've got my center set up where I want it to go, I'm pretty much ready to run the job. And so we'll kind of button everything up here, get a little position better on the camera. We can see the engraving. And we're going to talk more in a minute, Jimmy, about the different types of mugs, but let's get this started first. So closing up the doors, we don't want to run the machine, or can't really run the machine with the doors open with the live laser. However, what we can do is trace. So we remember from that keychain example, I was able to trace the area, and you can do the same thing on this mug. I could push the trace button and it would show us where the engraving is going to take place without running a job. So in this example, we're going to step you through as if you're sitting in our showroom. Again, the purpose of this presentation is to show you, if you were standing right by the computer, we're going to take some artwork, and we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. And so because the mug is sitting in sideways inside the rotary attachment in our design software, because it's pretty much what you see is what's going to get printed. So as we rotate that 90 degrees, we're then going to take the steps to print that straight to the unit. So we click on the print icon in Corel Draw, and then the Epilog engraver is selected, and we just say print. Not much to do, straightforward, ease of use. So in this case, I'm going to turn off the video because we want to see the artwork, and we're going to position that in a certain location. And so we really don't have to use the video in this case because it's in the far upper left corner. But one thing we do have to do is turn on an advanced feature called our center. So going to the dashboard's advanced feature, we're going to pull down center, and there you see the center icon. And so what this is doing is it's saying, I'm going to send this job over, and wherever the red dot is in the machine, that's going to be the center of the logo to be engraved. So again, I'm just trying to emphasize the ease of use, saying send the job over with center, and then move the red dot where you want the center of the object to be engraved, and then run it. It's not difficult at all. Jimmy, you have anything to add on center here?
Only that if, let's say, for example, I wanted to mark on a wine bottle, I wanted to say happy anniversary. So you end up putting the red dot pointer with the label facing up, and you put it above that label. And then over here, you tell it you're using center, which is the most intuitive way to lay something out on a cylindrical item. And of course, when it goes to engrave, it'll put it exactly where you set your red dot pointer.
So just like all the other jobs that are sent to the dashboard, you have the speed, the power, the DPI. And so as I get the camera in position in place here, we're going to see that that red dot is eventually going to be the center of the part that we want to engrave, or where we want the logo to be engraved. So this also will be a job that's on the display, and it would tell me how long it's going to take to burn it. I think it's about almost 3.5 minutes. So now we push the trace, and what that does, as we mentioned earlier, lets us see exactly where we want it to go. Jimmy, what else could you use this trace button for, especially in the rotary? This is very helpful, right?
Yes, it's just to confirm that, hey, I've got this in the right position, the right area facing up. Would be useful too if you're marking on two sides. You want to make sure that it's starting at the right position. It's more for cup orientation or part orientation.
Man, that's a great tip. You know, if you're going to engrave logo on two different sides of the mug, that, you know, being able to spin that. And what I'd also say about the trace feature is being able to spin something that you have maybe in a fixture to be sure that that's going to spin properly. So that is very helpful for you to kind of make sure everything is set and ready to go for something even odd shape, that to make sure it's going to spin on the wheels correctly and not move or glide off. I also want to point out that as this is burning, there is a silver clamp on the left side that is clamping the mug down to the drive wheels. So as Jimmy mentioned, we do have some mandrels and things we can sell, but for ease of use, it's just so much easier to clamp that mug down to those wheels and let it spin. As long as it's held in there firmly, it's not going anywhere. The right side is pretty much idler wheels. The left side is the drive motor side. And so what the laser is doing is it's interacting with this paste that we have on the stainless steel. I also want to talk about, Jimmy, you may want to touch on this, but, you know, we have to clean that metal too, because it can't have anything on it, right?
Right. You don't want anything on the surface. So normally people will clean the surface with alcohol, and then they'll come back and then they'll spray the coating on. Uh, there are different manufacturers of this. This in particular is made by Enduramark, and they have a couple of different colors. They have this, they have silver, and they have diamond dust, which is kind of like a metal flake.
Yeah, so there's kind of misnomer out there in YouTube land or blogs I've heard of, but there's no reason why you should have to really run a mug twice. We pretty much run on, and most of our customers run the mug just once. There's actually a red dot you saw there that we can use as a stop and starting point. And what you can do is actually spray the different colors. There's actually a video of this. You can email us and I can send you a link to the video where you can take that mug out, put it right back in the same place and run it for a different color. If you're trying to overlap or get different types of shadings of paste on a steel part, that's very easy to do and very doable. And you don't have to worry about it skipping or anything like that. As long as it's clamped down firmly and it's in the spot you want, it's a very, very reliable attachment and accessory. So what the laser is doing is it's using heat to bond this paste substance to the surface of the metal, and that does need to be cleaned. Jimmy, we don't really have a powder coat mug in this presentation, but you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So obviously the powder coated mugs are very popular. The laser does an excellent job of removing that powder coating and exposing the color of the metal underneath. You may notice if you go to put this in your laser that you'll laser it and the letters don't look clean. there's no need to do a second pass. The majority of our customers just use a degreaser to remove that extra residue that's basically stuck inside the letter. So the laser actually did get to the metal, but for whatever reason, it didn't kind of bonded back. ZEP is a real popular degreaser that a lot of our customers use. There's also Awesome, which you can get at a dollar store, which works pretty well.
So once that's finished, we pull that out. We can see a really nice dark etch. Now in all honesty, I've done some things on metal before where it wasn't clean, like it had some finger oil on it and it looked just like this when I pulled it out. But when you go to rinse it off, it just kind of washed off too. So again, it's really important if you're going to do a bare metal part, whether it's silverware or a butcher's knife or a blade on a pocket knife, sterling silver. Jimmy, have you ever done any sterling silver products with the ceramic stuff, that spray?
Yes, that's one material that does not bond. Actually, I've even talked to some of the manufacturers and they've had no success either. We're not sure if it's because the silver reflects a lot of the power or dissipates the heat, doesn't generate enough heat, but I've tried marking on several types of solid silver jewelry and with no success.
No, I will say I have seen some wedding cake knives done with the Cermark, and it stuck really well. I don't know if there's just a different kind of coating. So it's one of those things where all of these different metals that you're using, you do have to be sure that you test it. We can say it doesn't work on this or that, but there's so many varieties of alloys and coatings on top of different alloys. We always recommend that you bring that in and let us test that for you. But here you see that's permanent. So just washing that off, there's not much effort at all to laser etch or personalize a mug. That only took 3.5 minutes. Yeah, solid black. And that's been, this stuff has been UV tested. It's been light tested, temperature, very high temperature degrees. It's been salt water tested, acid bath. You can use this not only just for promotional products, but tags. We've had tags that go out in the Houston ship channel on salt water and stand up to those corrosive environments. So wanted to show not only just a mug being engraved, but also some glass. Jimmy, you want to talk about lasering maybe some glass and crystal?
Sure. When you go to laser glass, to get a good result, you really have to make sure that you find a way to dissipate the heat. So what we did here in this artwork is we set it to a grayscale. You could also use a masking to try to prevent that. Some people use wet newspaper. Some people use a sandblast stencil. But just doing 70% gray, having a faster than normal speed, and in a resolution of, say, 600, I think looks best. You'll get a nice frosted look on the glass. If you use too much heat, if you go too slow, or if you don't use the grayscale that we recommend, the 70%, you end up using, say, solid black, you'll get clear spots inside your frosted area. That's where the glass got too hot and it basically broke off a larger piece. If you want to get depth into glass, the only way really to do that is sandblasting. And as I mentioned, we could put sandblast stencil on this glass, and then from the sandblast stencil, you laser the artwork and then take it to the sandblast cabinet to get depth into the glass.
Yep. So just like we did the American Cross on the steel tumbler, we're just going to point to the center of where we want that logo to go. And then once that's all centered up, and we can also do the trace, right? So we can use our trace button. Now also I wanted to demonstrate, I kind of pause that because I want to show, because some folks might ask, well, if you don't have something you can use the plunger on, then how do you manually focus? So what you saw me do there is you can actually lower a manual focus gauge. You see there, it's just a little stem and it's magnetic, right? So basically you flip it down and you raise the table or material up till it touches that manual focus gauge, and then you can flip it back up and it stays really out of the way. So it's a super efficient tool to get something manually focused. Really not much to do with this glass, Jimmy, but how about, can you think of some other reasons why you couldn't use autofocus?
Sure. If you're trying to mark on anything soft, if I wanted to mark on some fleece, or if I wanted to mark on a koozie or something that when that plunger hits it, it's going to compress the material, you want to use manual focus, and so that you get a good focus point at the top of the material without pushing it down.
Believe it or not, we have some customers that laser food food items such as cakes and pies and cookies, and food decoration has gotten quite popular over the last few years. And if you have a pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving, you wanted to personalize, yes, you could do it with the laser. Some are hearing that for the first time. Yep, you can do it. But you wouldn't want to use the autofocus plunger to do that. You want to make sure you just barely touch, if not, just get really close. There's also soft foam that you can laser. Some of the tool shadowing that's done for tools would be a reason why you wouldn't want to use autofocus, because that plunger would just kind of sink deep into that soft foam, giving you an incorrect autofocus. So there's some materials, most of your solid materials are very good for that autofocus plunger. The rest, softer materials, you want to use the manual. And so just wanted to show and demonstrate how that worked with the manual gauge. But how's that look on that frosted glass, Jimmy? Can you see that there? I'll try and get a good picture here.
Yeah, it looks really good. Nice, a nice engraving without any kind of clear spots inside it.
Very frosted, not too deep, but nice personalized. And I don't know if you want to cover the idea about what this, what you could charge for something like this, but I mean, that's a dollar glass, and it only took them a little over a minute.
Yeah. So say for example, what a lot of our customers will do, so you take that glass, you buy it for $1, you might mark it up 3 times, so it's like $3, and then your engraving was 1 minute. A lot of our customers might charge $2 to $3 for that. So let's say at $6, you're already making a profit on that particular piece. I'd say that check your area, but a lot of people will charge no less than say $12 or $15 to mark a glass. So you can see that marking glassware could be very profitable.
Absolutely. Weddings and gifts, family reunions, events, fundraising is a super great application for the laser system. And, being, as we said before, you can do so many different materials with this machine. So we're going to pull out the rotary fixture, then we're going to move into a leather coaster. There's so many different types of leathers out there. There's some real tan leathers. You want to talk about leathers a minute? You do much leather cutting or engraving, Jimmy?
Sure. First of all, the sample that Randy's going to run here is a synthetic leather, leatherette, if you will. And there's a lot of laserable synthetic leathers out there that you can engrave and cut. Certainly, we can mark vegetable tan leather and cut it. We even have some customers that cut their own lacing for assembly of like a wallet or some other leather products. So on this sample here, it's black leather, and it's made to give good contrast. You'll see when Randy runs this, that actually it's going to expose a silver underneath. If this was just normal, black leather, you may not get the contrast on that leather that you would on this.
So on the website that we provided earlier in the beginning of the presentation, there's also a link under the resources tab about where to buy many of the laser-friendly materials. And we've got some sections there for leather as well. But the imitation leather, so to speak, you can engrave all kinds of book covers. You can engrave Bibles, coasters. We have some boot makers that have our laser for prototyping leather. We have some portfolios, some journals that can be laser etched. Many of those are in the sample club. We tell where to buy the material, and Bibles, so books like that. Anything with like a coating that you can kind of get some kind of contrast from, then super easy to do. So here I'm just getting that over, and just use the autofocus plunger to kind of set where I want my focus distance to be. And I wanted to show maybe on the job what we're going to print. So we just have a logo with some simple logo with some text, and that's what we're going to print to the machine. So again, all throughout the video, the proclamation here is ease of use, ease of use, ease of use. The Epilog is all American made, and it had, from top to bottom, and the whole thing is, right there in Golden, Colorado, designed, engineered right there and made. The laser tubes we'll talk about later. But the ease of use is something that is even down to our small machines. While they may not have the camera, you can just literally print something to these materials. So Here, being able to take something that is odd shaped. Now, this is a rectangle, but if you wanted some kind of abstract design across of it, it would be harder to kind of see what that's going to look like. And what you could also do is snap a picture of this. I mentioned that earlier, but you could also make this as a PDF. If this was a cutting board that was wood, you could put the text right over the top of it inside the machine, take a picture of that, send that back as a PDF, and send that to your customer as sort of a visual proof of what it's going to look like. So, and you can do that right inside the machine, right inside the Epilog Fusion Pro with the camera. So we're going to bring in the leather setting straight from our library. And then once we run and execute this job, it's going to be super fast. Doesn't take much power to burn the coating off of that. 100 speed, 35 power. We're going to go from the bottom up, a little bit easier to watch. And so I'm not going to move to the machine, the system just yet. But when I print this and run it, you can actually see on the monitor, if you kind of stayed there and watched, you could kind of see it run the job. So like I say, it is a live video feed from the laser system to the computer. And this wasn't anything that was added after the fact. It wasn't done from another company or a third party. This is all developed in-house from the ground up by the folks at Epilog in Golden, Colorado. So this is providing some really good contrast, and we'll move it over to the machine so we can get a better look at the live unit. So that's moving back and forth, burning that really crisp and clean. And as Jimmy mentioned, you have some leathers that may not burn as well. So again, we want to emphasize, if you've got some product that you want tested, would like a demonstration to see if these lasers would work, you can ship it to us, either to the Houston area, or you can ship it to our Dallas-Fort Worth office in Arlington, and we can test it for you. We can run your artwork. We can give you the speed and power and time it takes to do it, and recommend the machine and wattage that would take to achieve that in either a hobby type application or even a production setting. But what's nice about the display that's showing how long it's going to take to burn it before you even run it makes it really great to quote the jobs. Jimmy, anything else on leather you'd like to touch on?
I think that you did a good job there, Randy. I don't really have anything else other than, of course, if it's a leather you're not familiar with, you might want to find some extra so you can do a test. If it's a piece that you don't have a place that you can really test, if you can start with a really conservative first run and then adjust from there.
Yeah, we sometimes have folks that are really careful not to want to scorch the top surface of the, we didn't have to do that here, but like if it's a tan, very light color on top, you can put a paper mask over that leather to protect it and then peel it off. But this shows a really nice contrast to the piece. So let's see, we're going to show kind of all of the samples we've done so far, getting close to wrapping up soon. But we're going to kind of zoom out and show the materials. We've done quite a few, just showing how easy it is to move from project to project. Don't forget about the sample club that we showed, the video gallery, the photo gallery of all the different types of samples, where to buy the samples, making sure they're laser friendly, getting them tested. So we've done quite a few of those, and we're going to move from this segment into the presentation of more specifics on the machine. And then Jimmy's going to point out some features on the unit and show how that could benefit straight. This is all pretty much done on the Fusion Pro system, and this was a 60 watt. Jimmy?
Looking at the screen here, again, Epilog Fusion Pro series. We have a 2-year bumper-to-bumper warranty that covers everything. That covers optics, it covers belts. Those are things that a lot of other manufacturers consider consumable, but Epilog doesn't look at it that way. So if you do have a problem with any component, Epilog will send you a replacement part. The Fusion Pro series are available in wattages from 50 watts to 120 watts, 2 different sizes, 32 inch by 20 inch, and also 48 by 36. All Epilog systems, including the Fusion Pro, you can network your laser. The benefit of this is that you're able to connect multiple computers on your network. Will have the capability of sending a job to the machine if you network it. We do have USB as an option, but of course we think Ethernet is much more versatile. If you send a job over also and your computer shuts off, the job is over at the machine and you're not going to lose anything at the machine when it goes to run. There are some systems out there that connect via USB that if something happens at the computer, that's it. There's no more data being transferred at the laser. If you want to make your system wireless, you can do that too. You can connect it to your network and then connect via wireless from a computer that connects the same network, or you can even connect it to a wireless repeater or a range extender, if you will, and have it stand alone and connect wirelessly to the local area network. Randy just put an S up there just to point another thing out, that what if you have one computer and multiple lasers? Well, it works the other way too. You can actually have one computer that'll go through and output to, say, 4 or 5 lasers, if that works for your production model. Epilog makes their own tubes. We have Epilog CO2 waveguide laser tubes. It's an all-metal design and it's air-cooled. Also, it's controlled with an RF power supply, which is the most accurate way to control your laser firing. That RF control allows you to control the power to a level that even if you're going to do what's called a kiss cut, let's say you had 2 layers of material, like a tactile twill, you could cut through the top layer without touching the bottom layer, and then have another power that cuts through both, and then just weed off what you don't need.
And Jimmy, that's pretty hard to do with the glass tubes, isn't it?
Yes, the glass tubes don't have that kind of control. They're using very high DC voltage to control the firing of the laser, and from that standpoint, it doesn't do a good job of precisely controlling it. It's just going to blast through the material. Another point too is that this is all metal design. The glass tubes are, of course, like a bulb, if you will, and so therefore they don't have the same longevity. They don't have the same quality of beam that you can get from a metal tube. Also, ours are air cooled. You don't need any kind of water pump or any kind of a chiller unit to keep the tube cool. So our systems do have ceramic coated inserts that keeps the purity of the gas inside the tube, prevents corrosion. But our systems are made so that they can be recharged. So we have a lower recharge cost. So higher beam quality, longer life. Tubes are covered under the 2-year warranty with an optional 3rd-year warranty on the system if you'd like to get that. And then sometime between 3 years and 8 years, you may need to get it recharged, but the cost is very reasonable. We also have our radiance optics. So one of the things that Epilog does in order to get the highest quality engraving possible is that we actually condition the beam, if you will. We use a beam expander and collimator so that we get a larger beam that's going to terminate through our lens. That larger the beam is, the finer the point. Also gives a little bit of a rounder shape when you go to engrave, so that when I'm engraving a photograph and I want my pixels to be as small as possible so I don't have too much overlap, and I want them to be, as close to round as possible, that's what the radiance optics does. And so that, that beam is giving you great quality by the time it hits the material. Epilog's Fusion Pro series, they're the highest speed engraving over the largest work area with a top speed of 165 inches per second and 5 Gs of acceleration. That really translates into higher productivity. So the faster you can engrave it, the more you can get out the door, right? So the Fusion Pros are a way to really increase your productivity if you have a slower system already in your production. Randy demonstrated several times during the video here that we have our Iris camera positioning system. It's an overhead camera that provides an accurate picture of the working area, and you can get good placement, accurate placement of your artwork. This is real time, so that as I move the material, as I move the engraving, I can make sure it's positioned, rotated, do all the things that Randy demonstrated. One thing that I don't mention here is we also have a camera on the head. If you, say, for example, had printed registration marks or fiducials, we also have a system to recognize those for positioning of artwork. So if I screen print or UV print on some material, I can use those registration marks for positioning as well. We have a touchscreen control that allows you to select jobs, save jobs to memory. We have 1 gig of memory on board, so you can save multiple jobs. Joystick to actually control the movements and for selection of different items. We can set new origins, we can run diagnostics, and even more importantly with the touchscreen control panel is that as Epilog decides to add features, they can add features just by updating the firmware. So the firmware upgradable is a really great idea, where if you have another type of control panel, you don't have that capability. The touchscreen gives you that capability. Epilog with the Fusion Pro, they went through and they made a lot of changes to protect the motion system. So we have these safeguard features, meaning that you can see here from the shot of the lens carriage, you can't see a linear bearing rail. That's because it's covered up by sheet metal in the front side of the belt. That prevents dust and residue on getting on your bearings and gives the bearings a much longer life and more consistent operation. Also, we're blowing air on all of our optics. Every Fusion Pro comes with a built-in air compressor, and so there's air blowing down through the optics to prevent dust from getting up on your lens. You'll see in the next image, I'll show you that we have the capability of, we also have bellows that control our Y movement. So again, just to kind of show, again, this is what I was talking about is the belt right here that's in front of the bearing. And then you can see that we've got an air cone here. So air is actually blowing through this assembly down through this cone. And then we have our sweep air assist right here that blows at an angle also as like an additional air assist. So in this image right here, if you look up here at the top, in this area here, you can see there's bellows. And those bellows protect the electronics and also the motion system for the Y-axis. We have different table designs, 3 different table options. We have the steel downdraft table, which is right here, which Randy demonstrated in the video. We have our slat table, which we didn't show in the video, but this is really useful to prevent any kind of flashback when you're cutting acrylic and you need a perfect edge. So you can basically cut between the slats, they're adjustable, and the piece itself won't have any reflection from any kind of metal, giving like a vertical mark on your edge. And then, of course, we have our vector grid, which vector grid is useful for just about any kind of cutting, allows the fumes to escape underneath. This is on, both of these right here on a Fusion Pro 32. If you go to our bigger size, we have this split table design. So on our Fusion Pro 48, I could actually have the slat table on one side or the vector grid in combination with my downdraft table. So I could simply just move my engraving on whichever side I wanted to use. Or you could have the same type of table all the way across the bed size. We use long life steel bearings. You can see here in our design that basically the bearings ride an elliptical race. They go through and they ride on a machined groove, and they have sweeps to protect any kind of residue that may get inside the bearing. That allows us for greater rigidity and gives us the ability to run at the high speeds with the fast accelerations that we use. Our lens carriage assembly is actually using a dual block design. So instead of just one bearing block, we've got 2. And that gives us greater rigidity, and it reduces any kind of vibration you might see at those fast accelerations. The Fusion Pro series is available in CO2 or fiber or both, the dual source option. As you can see, what happens with the fiber is we're able to engrave on different kinds of metal pieces. You can see that, say for example, this is engraved in metal with the fiber, so is this. You can see this is actually some peak material, if you will, that was laser engraved. You can do different kinds of gun marking with PMags and stuff, and also deep into the metal with the fiber laser. And of course, the CO2 can mark into wood, it can cut acrylic, you can mark into stone, you can cut gaskets material, you can mark onto, like this is a guitar here, and you can even do signage. So if you had both laser sources in your system, you'd have the ability to mark just about anything. And that's the nice thing about it, and you can do it in the same job. With our processes, we could actually have a different color for fiber versus CO2, and you can have it automatically adjust the position for those engravings. So I'm going to finish up here by just letting you know that, of course, Epilog lasers are made proudly in Golden, Colorado, a USA-made product. All the engineering and customer service is also done at the factory in Golden, Colorado. We have all the parts needed for all the systems, so if you have an issue and you need a part, those can be overnighted to you. Epilog has been in business since 1988, proudly made in the USA, and of course, their phone service is always free. All kinds of training videos and other things that are available from Epilog. And as your distributor, our phone service is free as well. Randy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you touched on that really well. We want to just say that we appreciate everyone's time and watching. I know it's a long presentation, but we want to be sure we cover all of the features of the unit. So from all of us at Engraving Concepts, we thank you for watching our video, and please reach out to Jimmy or myself. My email is randy@engravingconcepts.com, and Jimmy's is jimmy@engravingconcepts.com. So Jimmy, thank you very much for your work today. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, and hope to see you all soon.